Hello, this is Paul Chek. Welcome back to part 2 of my blog series, a 3-part series called Space, Time, Movement, and Healing. In the last edition, we talked about space and spatial relationships and how that can affect our sense of well-being. Today, I will shift our emphasis to time. Time's quite a miraculous thing, if you would like to call it a thing, although it really isn't a thing, which is beside the point. So today I'm going to give you a little exploration of time, and I'm going to share some of the most important concepts that I have to use to manage myself so that I don't burn myself out, make myself sick or tired or whatever. And when you know these concepts and you do burn yourself out, at least you know who did it. And I'm going to share a number of ways that you can become more aware of how to use time favorably and even how to, shall we say, change the experience that you have of time so that you can recognize when you're speeding time up and compressing it, or when you're able to use awareness of how to slow time down and make things, shall we say, more perceptible, more digestible, and access the beauty of higher mind or intuition. So to begin with, I'm going to share a quote that I found. Vidya says it comes from...
It's the Serenity Prayer of St. Francis of Assisi.
The Serenity Prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. I found it on a bookmark with no quote, but I think it's very relevant. So we'll start and try to finish with this quote. It says, "God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." So that's a very, very important statement. And St. Francis of Assisi was a very wise man. St. Francis of Assisi is the one who, when people would ask him, "What is God?" or "How do I find God?" he would say to them, "What you are looking for is what's looking," which to me is the sign of a very wise and deep man. So now when it comes to time, there's a number of things I'd like to share with you. And what I'm going to do here is start with the fact that we have different kinds of time. We have what's called objective time. Objective time means there's 24 hours in a day for all of us here on planet Earth. And no matter what we do, we cannot change that. So that's very important to remember. So clock time is objective time. As Itzhak Bentov says, in objective time, each slice is the same for everybody. In other words, a second on a clock is a second on a clock everywhere in the world. An hour of clock time is an hour of clock time, and a day is a day. And because we've all made social agreements on that, and it fits with the 24-hour cycle of the sun or day and the moon or night, it's fairly objective even beyond our own perception of how we use time. Next, we have subjective time, which relates to our perceived flow of our day. So we all have a different sense of how things are flowing. Someone might say, "How'd your day go?" And you might say it flowed along well. Or you might say something like, "It was a rat race. I was racing around all day." So if you say it flowed really well, it would mean your subjective sense of time was that it was not compressed. And if it was a rat race, it would mean your subjective sense was that what appears to be objective time actually often appears to be not enough time, therefore it's compressed. So we want to realize that how we relate to time subjectively has everything to do with our experience of how we use and experience time objectively. So how we relate subjectively to objective time determines our experience of what happens in objective time, whether it flows or does not flow, whether it's compressed or whether it's relaxed, for example. Now, Earl Nightingale, years ago I was studying Earl Nightingale's work, and I was looking into time management issues to develop my PPS Success Mastery lesson number 8, which is called Time Can't Be Managed, or Time Management actually. And Earl Nightingale makes a very important point in one of his books. He says time cannot be managed because it's objective, it's 24 hours in a day, only activities can be managed. And I think that's what it really boils down to today. I, as most of you know, have been coaching all sorts of people, from the world's greatest athletes and movie stars and business moguls to moms, pops, and sick people of all types. And there is a very big difference in a person's subjective sense of time. And I can honestly say I can't remember a single case in my career where a person who was suffering from chronic fatigue, illness, chronic injury, or disease did not have a compressed sense of subjective time. And interestingly enough, even the people that I've worked with when I owned, for example, a physical therapy clinic that were on unemployment insurance or workman's compensation insurance, who really had no job, they were just in rehab, very frequently told me they could not get their home exercises, stretches, mobilizations, diet changes done because they didn't have enough time. So there you can see that, one, our sense of time is subjective, but as I could share from my experience coaching people, most people actually develop poor habits for managing themselves and burn up a lot of time doing things that are really not effectively contributing to what might be stated as their dream, and therefore perpetually live a nightmare of Groundhog Day. In other words, the person that has no time even when they're at work, paradoxically has no time when they're getting paid to do nothing but heal, but don't have time to heal because they're too busy doing things that are not really ideal but are habituated or habits. So we have to be aware that how we use time and what our subjective experience of it is literally boils down to choices that we make, and the choices that we make point back to the ideas or the beliefs we have about ourselves, about others, and about the world, which is much too deep to go all the way into than I can do in a short blog. But that's what Chek holistic lifestyle coaches are trained to do, to help people, is look into these issues. And my Chek 4-quadrant coaching mastery program, which will be online in the next few months, takes you very, very deep into the issues that cause these problems, the actual beliefs, and how to go about changing them. So now, when it comes to managing your day, you can see that I've just created a kind of a mock-up schedule: 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m., and then bedtime. Now, as many of you who have watched my blogs or my students would know, I use a 4-doctor system: Dr. Happiness, Dr. Diet, Dr. Quiet, and Dr. Movement, because those are the 4 essential categories that we must have conscious awareness of in life, or we will find ourselves creating unnecessary problems and pathologies and relationship challenges with ourselves and other people, to the degree that those 4 doctors or categories of the life experience are not managed. So if we look here, when it comes to the first thing we need to be aware of, as I've often said, what is your dream or your overarching goal or objective at this time in your life? If you don't have a dream, which is the bigger project that you're working on, for example, my dream is the Chek Institute and the progressive growth and development of that. So that's a large dream that covers the span of many, many years, and will cover probably the rest of my life. But within that, I have to have many dreams, which we would call goals or objectives to accomplish, whether it be filming blogs for you guys, or making new programs for my students, or managing myself effectively so that I can be a living example of my teachings instead of an all too common talking head. So whenever we have a dream, goal, or objective, we have to have core values to support that. Remember, your yes has no value until you learn to say no. So your core values are your own stated code for when to say yes and when to say no in order to be energetically aligned with the dream, goal, or objective that you're choosing to move towards. If you say yes when you should be saying no, it's kind of like taking a side road perpendicular to the destination you're trying to get to in your car. You may get there, but you might run out of gas along the way. You might even starve to death if you're not paying attention. And in many ways today, people are literally starving to death. They're starving for meaning. They're starving for spiritual sustenance, something that is deeper than just the activities of the day, the mundane of most people's days. But there is a way to turn those mundane things into beautiful things if they're part of your dream, goal, or objective. So looking at my schedule here, we have to have an awareness of what our needs are relative to our wants. Our needs are the things that we need to keep ourselves healthy. You have to have food or you're going to have problems. You have to have water or you're going to have problems. You have to breathe or you're going to have problems. You have to have sleep or you're going to have problems. And you need 8 hours of sleep, ideally getting to bed by 10 o'clock and rising with the sun around 6, because that is the cycle that our hormones are driven by, as I clearly show in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. So when it comes to food, we need to eat. So there's breakfast, there's lunch, and there's dinner, just to occupy a time slot. We have to have exercise, which is doctor movement. So we've got food, doctor diet, exercise, doctor movement. Work would fall into doctor movement. And we need to have some sort of spiritual or personal growth time. That could be taking a course at night. It could be taking a distance learning course through an institute like the Chek Institute, such as an online course. It could be time to read things that are nourishing to your soul. It can be meditation time. And it can be work in time, which in my system is using movement to cultivate more life force energy than it costs to do the movement, which is a form of active meditation. My book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, shows you a variety of active meditations or work-in exercises for each of the different areas of the body that you might be having problems. And in that book, they're called zone exercises, which shows you which part of the body. For example, zone 3 deals with digestion and elimination. So if you're having problems there, then we want to work with harmonizing the energy systems and or the biological systems that are involved in that problem. That's a simple way to bring awareness and begin to take responsibility for what you're creating and recreate it so it's more dream affirmative. And we also have to have sleep, which is doctor quiet. Now in my book, The Last 4 Doctors Will Ever Need, I show you that there's 3 types of rest. Total rest, which is sleep, active rest, and then passive rest, and I go into those in the book so you can learn how to use the science of rest much more effectively. Then we have other activities, such as shopping, taking care of kids, social activity, and then we have this thing called TV and media, which can be also part of your spiritual or personal work. For example, I like to watch documentaries on informative things. I like to watch DVDs on informative things. So sometimes instead of reading, I use my evening time to watch things that help me grow spiritually, which I find more relaxing than reading, because reading's not something that I really enjoy. It's more like a task for me. But I like that richer learning environment. So my point is there's a very effective way to use television. Television also puts people into a hypnotic trance and lowers their basal metabolic rate. So if a person is having a hard time meditating, they often find TV nourishing to them because it brings them into a hypnotic or more of a meditative state. The problem is that you're highly susceptible to being programmed to buy things you don't need and be more afraid than you need to be because everybody's house is getting broken and the world's falling apart. So you can use TV as a form of mindless meditation, but remember, when you're in that mindless state, you're wide open, and that's when marketing agencies take complete advantage of you because you're, shall we say, sleeping at the gate of your own consciousness. So when we look at all this, we can see that when we put our needs in, we need to eat, we need to sleep. So here you sleep, and you can see I've got the average person here today watches 4.7 hours of television a day, but it's amazing to me that the people that come to me that tell me they don't have time to do anything when they're hurt, and even like I said, the ones on workman's compensation or other forms of insurance tell me they don't have time, but whenever I've inquired how much television they're watching, they've always got time for their soap operas, to watch the Death and Destruction Hour and all sorts of other things, and to spend huge amounts of time on social media, all of which really adds up to a bunch of nothing at the end of the day, unless you're using television and media in ways I've previously described. So then when we start looking at issues of work, we have to say, well, where am I going to put my work time? So, most of us eat breakfast. Some of us may exercise in the morning, so you could put exercise here. Possibly. You could put exercise in the afternoon. You could, if you wanted to, you could do it on a lunch break, but that would again trigger time compression, because then you're not digesting and being present and being mindful about what you're eating. There's a number of ways we can, shall we say, skin this cat, but at the end of the day, all that matters is, are you healthy, are you vital, are you clear, and are you capable of participating in the creation of your own dream, and therefore the dream and lives of other people effectively as a living example, or are you part of the disease that has the world right now and is killing the planet? So then we may have to put work in here, and we have to put work, usually people work 8 hours a day. So then we have some hours in the evening that you can do various things with. And the question is, are you doing things that are supportive, or are you doing things that are potentially something to hold up as a caution, because your body is showing you that your choices are not leading to health. Your emotions may be out of balance, causing challenges in relationship to yourself or others. Your mind may not be stable, and these activities could be overflowing into bedtime, which is an ineffective use of time relative to sleep, because sleep is the number one free healing agent there is. There's nothing more powerful for healing from anything than sleep, and very few people have enough sleep, and many of them tell me that they cannot sleep, which points right back to some of the things that we're about to discuss. And it is generally not hard to correct. It's just the hard part for anyone isn't understanding what they're doing wrong, it's changing their behavior. In fact, almost all of my students worldwide and all of my patients that I've ever had, when I ask them, are you eating enough and are you eating high quality food, or are you eating too much? They know the answer. They know when they're eating garbage, they know when they're eating too much, they know when they're eating too little, they know when they're binging, they know when they're starving themselves. Are you getting too much or too little exercise? They always know the answer. Are you getting too much or too little sleep? They always know the answer. Are you doing things that are happy making for you? They always know the answer. So for me, after 32 years of coaching people, it's very clear to me it's never a question of whether or not the individual knows what's wrong. The question is, what do we need to do to help them change their behavior? Because when we have as much cultural programming through media streams and other sources, magazines, radio, you name it, people act so unconsciously that they're literally walking around in a hypnotic state, and oftentimes have to get burned out, have to get sick, have to crash cars, have to cut fingers off with saws at work because they're not paying attention, in order for consciousness to bring things up to the surface, to make them aware that they're making choices that are ultimately not only self-destructive but potentially destructive to people around them. For example, if you're a school bus driver and you fall asleep at the wheel because you're mismanaging yourself, you not only risk injuring yourself but a lot of people's children. And that's not uncommon, these kinds of things. I've spent many years in my life rehabilitating injured workers who have done things like cut fingers off or parts of hands off, or run saws through legs, or drilled through their hand. The list is very long. These things are very, very common when you consider the number of people taking drugs for psychological pathology it's somewhere between 40 and 50% of the U.S. population is on some kind of psychotropic drug. In fact, Basil van der Kolk says something like 40% of active military duty people are on psychotropic drugs today, which many of which is due to four-doctor mismanagement, even in the military, where you think they'd be interested in the well-being of their soldiers, but it's another, shall we say, corporation. So when you look at all these activities, we have to ask ourselves what's being mirrored back to us as the result of our choices. Is my body healthy? Are my emotions stable? Is my mind a tool under my own control that I can use effectively? And do I have a sense of meaning or purpose in my life, which we would call the spiritual agenda? So number 2 in my formula says, in order to live your dream effectively, you need to identify what's out of balance so you know where you need to bring your awareness to. How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy gives you a series of questionnaires to identify those imbalances, and it gives you specific instructions on how to change them. Once we know where we're out of balance, then we get to step number 3. We have to make choices, and there's only 3 choices you can make in relationship to any person, place, or thing. The optimal, which is dream affirmative, and usually best for everybody involved. The suboptimal, which usually is related to some form of instant gratification but causes problems in relationships with those that you are creating your dreams with. And then option 3 is to do nothing. The positive aspect of doing nothing means I need more information to make an intelligent decision. I need a timeout. This conversation or argument is no longer productive, therefore I must step away until I can compose myself. And then the negative application is to do nothing, is to be apathetic and to not care. So the choices that we have to make to balance ourselves always have to do with the 4 doctor categories and whether or not we're willing to manage or make changes in the categories that we can see that are leading to health problems. And whenever we have health problems, we have a sense of time compression, and whenever we have overexposure to time compression or trying to get too much done relative to what is realistic to try to do for most people in a day, then we trigger health problems. We trigger the overconsumption of stimulants, sugar, coffee, tea, drugs, get fix, quick pills, quick muscle tactics, 5-hour energy, 24-hour energy, monster energy. You know, you see the success of all these products shows you that we're becoming more and more unconscious. But at the same time, that means profitable to corporations. So if you want to spend your life like a pumpkin in a patch being farmed, you can do that. But remember, pumpkins don't have much to say when you carve them open. But when you're that pumpkin, you have to pay for that. And even if you're using socialized medicine, it still costs all of us a lot for people to stay in pumpkin stage. So now with these concepts, I'd like to now move into some other very important awarenesses. Now, when we look at research on time and the great thinkers about time and great meditators like Itzhak Bentov, who wrote a very, very excellent book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum by Itzhak Bentov. This is probably the very best book for anyone that does not understand spirituality or has a materialistic viewpoint and thinks that all those things are fluffy. Itzhak Bentov was a very celebrated scientist. He is the inventor of what is known as the pacemaker that we use for people that have had heart problems and can no longer effectively regulate the pace of the heart. So Bentov is the scientist that invented the pacemaker that is used today. He died in a plane crash in around 95, but he left 3 very beautiful books. The first one I recommend is Stalking the Wild Pendulum, because he gives you a very scientific basis which you can use to understand what spirituality and metaphysics really is. While we're on that topic, another excellent book on these subjects is The Yoga of Time Travel by another one of my personal heroes, Fred Alan Wolfe. These books are different, but they both have valuable information that might be helpful for you wanting more information on this. So what I've done is I've drawn you a diagram And I've had to simplify it because some of these things can be more complex than most people watching my blog might be able to handle without a lot of background training. So in the middle of the line, you see this circle, you see the line. That stands for objective time. That's the time that's the same for all of us. That's the seconds, the minutes, the hours, the days that a clock will record. Now we have a vertical line, so from here up it stands for vertical time. So when you get into the highest point of vertical time, you would be in a state, something like a Buddhist might refer to as no mind, but there would be no conscious awareness of time as it relates to objective time, and a minute could be a millennia, a second could be a day, and a lot of things can happen there. So we go through these types of different states quite regularly. The point being though is that most of us are unconscious of these different states. If you look at the work of Ken Wilber, Dustin DiPerna, and others who have looked at what are called vantage points, or different points of which our consciousness, shall we say, migrates to throughout the day, our waking state is the lowest vantage point where we're the most bound to objective time. Then we have dreaming. So as you go into a meditative state, the first thing you do is you go into more of a dreamlike state. And this is where things like astral travel and mental projection and even remote viewing take place, all of which I have a lot of experience at. Then causal would be related to deep dreamless sleep. So that happens, I think, around every 90 minutes at night when you're asleep. But still there's a witness there, there's still a body there, there's somebody there breathing. But if you took that further, you'd go into vertical time. And so getting into the state of vertical time is what a lot of the spiritual books, Taoist books, Buddhist books, a lot of these other books talk about, shall we say, being able to get out of the wheel of samsara and live an eternal life, which is a big topic we won't go into today. But really, this is what the now is. Now, if you look at how I've used the word now, N stands for not now, which equals the past, and W stands for will be, or the future. The future is based on probabilities. The choices that we're all making simultaneously ultimately determine what will be objectively experienced in the future, but the future is not here, and the past is not here except for in our memory. So really the only thing we ultimately have is what we experience in the moment, and that's where mindfulness as a concept and as a tool becomes very, very important. I love Thich Nhat Hanh says, mindfulness is the skin that protects me from all things stressful. I'm paraphrasing, but he basically says that his practice of mindfulness is what protects him from being swept away into stressful experience, which produces time compression, as I'll show you. So now what I'm showing you here is that if we're taking the time to meet our needs and to give ourselves time to work in, to work out, to feel good, to manage ourselves, to sleep well, then we end up having harmony within biological systems. The body has what are called biological oscillators. So the brain, the heart, and the gut or solar plexus system, which is responsible for controlling a lot of the functions of your organs, have all been shown to be biological oscillators. In other words, they develop waves of pulsation, of energy and movement in the body. When we're healthy, the biological oscillators are entrained, so they're like dancers dancing in step, and there's a sense of ease and flow and harmony, and that's a big component of health. If we get out of balance and our time experience becomes too compressed, then we begin to have stress reactions in the body, which have negative effects on hormones, negative effects on mental emotional states, the body, negative effect on our capacity to connect to ourselves and other people. In other words, we become progressively more isolated in ourselves as we feel more and more unhealthy, and we become more and more dependent upon others in order to feel safe and to have any sense of freedom. For example, if your back's badly injured and you can't go to the store, you're dependent upon somebody else to feed you, without which you don't have a lot of freedom. All you can think about is feed me, feed me. So the more we don't manage ourselves, the more of a burden we become on other people, because we can't survive without them, which means that we now end up having to be one of the slots or multiple slots on their time schedule, usually because of laziness, lack of concern, disrespect, perpetual child living as a child forever, expecting others to take responsibility for you, etc. So the point I'm making here is that through things like zone exercises, when you're doing zone exercises where you're coupling breathing and movement, you're now bringing the biological oscillators online together, and so you end up having a sense of ease and a sense of harmony, and it usually takes people somewhere between 10 and 12 minutes, sometimes up to 20, to get the mind chatter to stop so that the brain stops being such an influence on the other biological oscillators. Now, there's many biological oscillators in the body. I just gave you the chief ones. Respiration is a biological oscillator. Your digestive system, I mentioned. Your nervous system's an oscillator. Your immune system's an oscillator. So the way the brain, the heart, and the gut system work together regulates how effective you have, how much harmony you have in the other biological systems. So I limit it to those in my explanation. Now, so what we see here is, this is how we use time. Now, Itzhak Bentov gives a neat meditation, and I've done lots of these types of meditations, so you can prove this to yourself if you'd like. All you've got to do is use a clock that has a sweep hand on it, whether it be a watch or just a regular clock that has a second hand on it. And what you do is you set the clock in front of you, and you relax progressively, deeply. Taking a few deep breaths is a good idea. It's a good idea if you're wound up to do some push-ups, jumping jacks, sit-ups, run around the block to give yourself a little fatigue so your body wants to calm down. And then what Bentov suggests is that you look at the clock and allow your eyes to close and visualize yourself at some point in your past where you were really, really relaxed and enjoying yourself, such as laying on the beach on vacation, where you weren't worried about money, you weren't worried about getting to appointments, and that you felt, shall we say, at peace. And take your consciousness there and really try to become so present with the experience that you can literally hear the waves on the beach, you can feel the wind touching your skin, you can feel the warmth of the sun, you can feel the sand underneath the towel that you're laying on or right on your skin, and just allow yourself to relax into that state. And after you've been there for a while, just try to stay in there, but slowly open your eyes with a soft gaze, and then hold that state and look at the second hand on the clock. And what you will probably notice is that the second hand seems to come to a complete stop every second, and the deeper you're into that meditative state, the longer the second hand seems to hold still. Then if you come out of that meditation and just start thinking and being your normal self again and look at the clock, you'll now notice the second hand seems to move without stopping at all, almost as a continuous sweep. So what he's showing you is that as you relax and go from the waking to the dreaming to the causal and approach vertical, that your actual sense of how quick time is moving subjectively slows down. And the beauty of that is that as those seconds, if you will, slow down, the amount of subjective experience or process time you have goes up. Now, this is very important because this area up here is the home of intuition. This is where huge insights come in. Many of my greatest insights have come in a flash. Literally, I may have been meditating on something for sometimes a year or two, some of these deeper questions that I have. And then all of a sudden, like a lightning bolt strikes, I've gotten so much information, I've literally sat down and wrote for 8 or 10 hours straight till my fingers hurt, just to download what came in the time span of objective time of maybe 1 or 2 or 3 seconds. So as we get to subjective time, it's much, much more expansive, and then our capacity to be present with things is significantly enhanced. And many, many times doing Tai Chi or meditating, I've come out of a very deep meditation and thought, wow, I wonder how long I've been here. It felt like I've been meditating for hours, and I looked at the clock and maybe only 15 or 20 minutes had gone by. And so what you see is that as you relax more and give yourself permission to let go of the mind buzz and the things that are creating dissonance or incoherence in you, and you start to harmonize, you actually start to harmonize with frames of reference that are much, much larger. For example, time on the Earth is a frame of reference. But if you go on Mars, I think it's something like 256 Earth years for Mars to make one lap around the sun. So no matter where you're at in the universe, time is relative. So as you expand out, you actually realize that you are actually, what you really are is an awareness or a consciousness that has no time-space limits. You can literally expand yourself to the sun, to the Milky Way, to infinity if you want to. And many meditators have these experiences. This is by no means a novel experience that I myself am having. But on the other hand, if we try to put too much, so if you start putting more activities in there and you try to stuff too many things, pick the kids up, take the kids here, go shopping, get this, get your golf clubs tuned up, go get your car fixed, get groceries, stop here, and then watch my 4.7 hours a day of television, what you start seeing is that you are constantly rushing and you can't relax, and you start to even vibrate or sweat, and your breathing gets fast and shallow, and your pH levels change, and your body starts to get hungry all the time because you're not getting enough oxygen, you're not breathing enough, and then you get anxious and wound up because you have too much cortisol running through you and you can't sleep. So when you do get in bed, you actually don't really sleep. You stay trapped in your head, and many people report to me that they stop even dreaming, which is essential because it is during dream time that our psyche balances ourselves out and brings up symbolic representations of the experiences we're having as a means of, shall we say, guiding us. And we can even have a lot of precognition in dreams. Precognition means awareness of what's going to come tomorrow or in the future, which is very, very powerful. If you have precognitive dreams, they really let you know there's something a lot more going on here than the ego itself can wrap its head around. So as we start mismanaging ourselves and doing things that we want at the expense of the things that we need, we fall right into the trap that Buddha warned everybody about, which is object desire. I want this car, I want this jewelry, I want these boobies, I want this watch, I need to have this position, this job, this blah, blah, blah. It goes on forever. And so you get people that have all sorts of these things, and I've coached people with a lot of things. Many people that see me are very wealthy people. At one time I had 6 people flying their own private jets to see me at the same time, many of them billionaires, who had all the houses, all the cars, all the toys, all the women, whatever they wanted. They just pull out their checkbook and they got it, even changing laws. But they're sick people, that's why they're coming to see me. Unhappy people, broken marriages, challenges with the children, many of the kids on drugs because they become unmanageable. So these are serious issues. So what happens is as your wants start getting in the way of authentic needs, you start having time compression. So now where before a second or two could be a long enough period to get enough information to change your life or write a book, now you don't have enough seconds and you're racing, so time gets very compressed, and that triggers a stress reaction in the body. And so here's the thing, we not only have time compression, but if you look at the watch now, the second hand seems to be sprinting around that clock, and the hour hand seems, oh my God, Oh, it felt like 10 minutes, it's 2 hours. Oh, what am I going to do? Okay, so as Einstein says, when you're, in paraphrase, when you're making love to your sweetheart, time seems to go by very quickly. In other words, a lot of time goes by very quickly, but when you're sitting on a hot stove, a very short period of time seems like forever. So if you're unhappy, you're stressed, and you're in a negative state, then your experience of time is that it moves painfully slow. If you're trying to get too many things done, it seems like time is moving dangerously fast. Either of those can be negative time dilations compared to meditative time dilation because you chose to be there for your own well-being. So now there's a key point I'm getting to. In our body we have what's called the HPA Axis. Hypothalamus, which is the timekeeper in the brain, pituitary, which is the master regulator of the hormonal system, and then the adrenals, which are the chief regulators of cortisol or your glucocorticoid hormones or your stress reaction. Glucocorticoids or cortisol are stimulating to the reticular activating system of the brain. They create an awakening state, and as the levels rise up, you become hyper awake. You can become agitated, nervous, constantly fidgeting, worried all the time, anxious all the time. And this is, hand in hand with this thing called anxiety that people have. So if we are managing ourselves effectively and we are breathing, we're listening to our heart, which is how you find what your dream is and how you know when you're on your dream, and that's what your conscience is. It's the part of you that is aware of your ideals and lets you know when you're departing from your core values or your ideals that are relevant to your dream. So if we listen to our heart mass research shows, as I said in the previous blog, we are first aware through the heart system, which then makes us aware in the brain. But if we aren't paying attention to what we really love and we're doing what we think we have to do or what someone else told us to do, or to please mommy or to please daddy, or because you're afraid to be alone, and if you tell the truth about your feelings about some religion or whatever, that no one's going to love you anymore, then you kind of just bury your heart. And remember the rule, feelings buried alive never die. They manifest themselves in a shape or form that looks as a physical representation of your fears and your stresses, and we call that disease. From the heart, the information makes it to the brain. From the brain, it goes down to the body, which here we must indicate the solar plexus, because that's one of your chief biological oscillators, and the solar plexus is the home of our instincts. So the heart we could call the home of our intuition and foresight. The brain we would call the processing center, and the gut we would call our instincts about whether or not we're moving in the right direction, making the right business deal. This is where the heart and the brain speak, so that if we can't hear the heart or the brain, at least we can hear the body. I'm getting anxious, I'm nervous, my body's tightening up. So you see that the system gives you many opportunities. First, you can feel it. Next, you can think about it. And third, you can feel it as bodily reaction or sensation. And then it rises up into consciousness. So you're actually only conscious of what's going on by the time your heart's told your brain and your brain's told your body. So if your body's not healthy, you're less conscious. If your brain's too busy being distracted with too much television, Facebook, and silly shit, then your brain's jumping around paying attention to everything but what's important to developing yourself and your dream. And if your heart's shut down, then, well, it's safe to say if your heart can't feel love and you're not willing to generate love, then it just pays attention to what you're afraid of, which makes your body afraid, and you become conscious of everything you don't want instead of what you do want. And that all is a negative acceleration of time. Yet when you're in a dream affirmative state of creating your life and participating and following that simple 1, 2, 3, 4 system I've developed for people, which you can study in my multimedia ebook, The Last 4 Doctors You'll Ever Need, How to Get Healthy Now, which is available at Chek, CHEKinstitute.com. I show you how to organize your core values, and I show you how to assess your breathing, and I show you how to do work in, and all sorts of neat things with little video clips, audio clips, slides. It's a powerful little $25. For $25, you could change your life and your whole family's life. So when we're in flow, then we have normal regulation of the HPA axis, and we follow the sun and the moon. We go up with the sun, and we go down with the sun. And our anabolic hormones are in balance with our stress or catabolic hormones. It's a catabolic meaning tissue destructive. The right amount of glucocorticoids is productive, but too much of them or not enough of them is destructive. So we can see then that we can balance ourselves or we can stress ourselves. Notice that the flow goes in the opposite direction. If you're under too much stress, your timekeeper says you don't have enough time, which then leads to excessive output of glucocorticoids, which then your pituitary has to try to counterbalance somehow and manage that. For example, if you have too much stress hormones in your body, your liver actually has to start detoxifying. So your own stress hormones can actually be poisonous to your body, just like too much of anything. So then the pituitary has to try to step in and try to regulate all this stuff. So you see that the negative cycle can just drive you right into fatigue first, then illness, and then disease. Now, if the story that we're telling ourselves is different than the story we're telling other people, then we have a story gap, which creates stress, because then we are always having to be multiple people. I told him or her or mom or dad I was this or would do this, but in my head I knew I wasn't going to do it. Well, now you have multiple personalities to deal with because you're not living in alignment with your dream and your own values. And if you can't be honest about your dream and your values with yourself, you can't be honest with anybody else, which means that you never really stand in the same place that your feet are. The Aboriginals say the man whose body and feet are not in the same place is crooked, or they say the man whose head and feet do not stand in the same place is crooked. So we have to be an adult, we have to be conscious of the choices that we make and know there's only 24 hours in a day and time can't be managed, only activities can be managed. Yet there are many of us that do get a lot of things done. I consider myself a productive man. If you were to look at my resume, you'd probably think I've been here living for 300 years. And then you look at people like Aldous Huxley and you know, many of the great minds out there that have just written volumes. Carl Jung, my God, I've been reading Carl Jung for 15 years now, and I have only, you know, probably made it through 1/3 of all the collected papers of Carl Jung. Look at Ken Wilber. These guys really have a well-developed system of using time effectively so they get more sense of objective minutes by using the subjective time qualities in a way that is nourishing and compresses information down so that you get a lot in a very short period of time, which is why meditation and diet and lifestyle practices are so critical. Otherwise, you're just on the hamster wheel we call the rat race, and every day's Groundhog Day, except the groundhog gets so sick he can't even get up to experience the day. So that is essentially what I wanted to share with you about time. There certainly we could get very interesting and metaphysical and scientific about it, but my point is to keep it practical and to say, look, there are tools that you can use. Most of them are very, very simple, and all it requires is that you get clear on what it is that you want to become, who you choose to be, and if you're not sure, then manage yourself effectively and see every day as essential to your dream, because you're exploring to find out what opens your heart and gives you that sense of, wow, I love doing this. I could do this for years, or I could do this for the rest of my life. And then you enjoy the natural challenge of creating yourself and creating your life as a labor of love. But a labor of love is always sustainable. A labor without love is stress and compression and too much hypnotic trance where you get yourself taken over by the corporate dictocrats. So thanks for joining me today. If you want some more resources, you've got my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. You've got The Last 4 Doctors You'll Ever Need, How to Get Healthy, multimedia ebook. You've got HLC1 online. So HLC1 goes It shows you how to master what's in my book, but teaches you even more practical things. And we now have it online so you can study it 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. And it's a fantastic course that's changed the lives of thousands of people. You've got PPS Success Mastery Lesson 1, how to find and live your legacy or your overarching dream, and it shows you how to identify what are the blocking factors. PPS Lesson 2 is self-management, shows you how we get programmed by various organizations, be it religion, media, corporation, etc. Shows you how to use the science of brainwashing to clean your brain of all the things that aren't dream affirmative and manage yourself effectively. PPS Lesson 3 is the science of effective goal setting. And Lesson 8 is time management, which I've just given you a, shall we say, a synopsis of. Upcoming, we have Chek 4-Quadrant Coaching Mastery, which is a very deep course. If you like this kind of depth, that course is even much deeper than the things I've talked about today. And that's really both a self-healing program, and it is a program to teach you how to master the process of coaching people through behavior change and making transitions in their life. Thanks for joining me today. I will come back with part 3 where we talk about movement, but now let's return back to where we started, because I think that statement that we started with will have more meaning now. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, like all that, and the wisdom to know the difference between a want and a need. If you have the wisdom to differentiate a want versus a need, you're already wise in our culture. Thanks for joining me. I will look forward to sharing with you on my next blog on movement.